Hello and welcome back. This is Candace from Candoodle, and today I have a super fun watercolor and Copic marker technique for you. I used it for a sympathy card, but it could apply to any sort of card, and I know a lot of us struggle to make sympathy cards, so I thought this was a good way to use this technique. So let's get started. So I'm going to start by making the flowy watercolor background. So I have some Canson mixed media paper, and this is kind of a hybrid between watercolor paper and regular cardstock, and I find it's a bit brighter white than watercolor paper. So I'm going to come in with some clean water and just kind of paint a blob. And then I'm going to come in with some of my distress inks that I've smooshed down. And I have Wilted Violet, Picked Raspberry, and Peacock Feathers. I do have Mermaid Lagoon there, but I didn't end up using it in the final thing. So I'm just not being overly careful with where they are. I just pick colors that kind of don't create mud when they're put together. And I just did one simple coat and I'm leaving it at that. I have a tendency to overwork when I'm doing watercolors, but with this paper, it's quite a bit thinner. So you really don't want to overwork it or add too much water. And then I did speed up the drying process with my heat gun. So now I'm coming in with this stamp set from Pawsome Stamps, which has this most beautiful floral, and it's called Loving Thoughts, and it's a really nice sympathy stamp set. So I cut my cardstock down to be about a regular card size, and then I'm going to stamp down that floral with my Gina K amalgaming because it's Copic safe, and it's totally okay if it hangs over the edges. I didn't even plan this, and it somehow perfectly fit within that blob that I painted. So now I cut that out using one of my rectangle dies, so it's going to fit nicely on a card base. And then I'm going to come in and do the alcohol technique over. So you'll see on the side the colors that I'm using, and these caps look a bit different because these are my Ohuhu markers, which I recently got on Amazon. So I'm kind of trying them out and seeing if I like them. So far, they're really great, and I'm very impressed, quite frankly. They're a lot cheaper than Copics, and I think they're a great starter pack. I can definitely talk more about them as I use them more if people are interested, but just so you know why the caps look a bit different in today's video. So what I'm doing is I have three gray colors and I'm starting at the inside of the flower, like the centermost, and putting my darkest and then brushing out with my next color and then my next one. And then at the end, I am using my colorless blender and just kind of brushing in from the sides to really help those colors kind of blend in with the background. Instead of having like the more harsh lines that you might get if you just stopped at your third gray color. Even though it is quite light, I found using the colorless blender really helped it to kind of blend in the background. And so what is this doing is really creating kind of a glazed look over the background. So it's not entirely hiding the background because alcohol markers are transparent, they're not opaque, but it's giving depth and dimension that I wouldn't feel comfortable being able to create with watercolor, if that makes sense. So I just think it's a really nice way to kind of bring your stamp into the foreground and add a bit of interest and dimension, but without having to be like an expert watercolorist. So I think this technique is very forgiving as well. Even if you don't color things perfect, like I never know where to put shading, the flowers still ended up looking great in the end. So I think that it's a really nice technique and you still get the color of the background behind. So once I was done with my coloring, I'm going to come in and I'm going to use my ATG and add some adhesive to the back of that and glue it down to an A2 card. Whenever I use this mixed media paper and do watercolor on it, I like to glue a panel the same size underneath just to give it some stability, and especially I use my heat gun so things were a little bit wonky, and this just kind of helps it to lay flat so that when I attach it to my card base, it's going to lay very nicely. So now I'm coming in with the sentiment that says deepest sympathy, and I'm using my tracing paper to kind of see where I want to put that. I didn't love it in the bottom corner. I just felt it was like disconnected from the center. So I moved it up a little bit more so it's kind of over my painted block. And I felt that that kind of pulled the design together a bit better. So once I was sure that I really liked the placement of that, I took away my tracing paper and stamped it down on the card panel. And I did stamp it a couple times just because this paper has some tooth to it. So I wanted to make sure that I got a nice impression. And then the back of my card, it looked a bit naked when I was putting the panel down just to my card base when it was white. So I used my mid-color gray that I had used when I was coloring the flowers, and I just colored around the edges to give that a matte. And then I'm coming in to finish this off with some sequins. This is the Pawsome Stamps Spring Bling Mix, and it has really pretty pastels. And there we have the final. I hope that this technique gave you some inspiration for combining mediums. You'll have to let me know down below in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in another video. Bye!